Okay. Let's talk about how to get better at cycling. The beginner's guide. So getting better does not have to be too complicated. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the broad strokes of how to get better. And if you are interested in getting better, it is like a starting point for you to dive deep into. So let's get started. The first thing you need to get better is to bike a lot. It's a simple equation, really. The more you bike, the more you get better. So the cyclist who bikes 10 hours a week is likely to become a better cyclist than the one who bikes 2 hours a week. So for me, time on the bike is the biggest metric that I look at. I used to look at distance and elevation gain, but I don't do that anymore. Although, if you did that, it is also a pretty good way to get better. But I feel like it can be fool's gold. Because if you look at purely at distance or elevation gain, you'll be doing routes that are efficient at gaining distance or elevation gain. And that means, for most people, that they'll end up doing the same routes over and over again. And that is an easy way to lose motivation for cycling. The easiest way to be motivated to cycle is to genuinely enjoy your riding. Which brings us to the next thing to get better on the bike. If you want to enjoy your cycling, you have to make sure that you are comfortable on the bike. If you find riding your bike uncomfortable or painful all the time, then there is something wrong with the fit of the bike. And the easiest way to get the fit of the bike right is honestly just pay for the bike fit. Especially if you're new to cycling, this is the cheapest and fastest way to get comfortable on the bike, especially if you don't know anything about cycling and you're just starting out. I remember back when I started, I got a bike and it had a stock saddle and I didn't really know how high up the saddle should be. So I put it up there and I started biking and I had this mild saddle discomfort and it was uncomfortable enough that I talked to my friends about it, other guys who also started cycling. So I asked them about saddle discomfort and the guy told me that I should try out a different saddle. I should buy a new saddle. And as I was talking to him, I realized, oh wait, this guy has bought like 10 different saddles before he found the saddle that was comfortable for him. And that didn't seem right to me at the time. So fortunately, I did not buy a new saddle. I stuck to my stock saddle and I just lowered the saddle height a little bit. I adjusted the angle and eventually it became comfortable. Although I did not spend a lot of money doing that, I did spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to get comfortable on the bike. Because in order to do that, you have to change something and then go on a bike ride. And then after the bike ride, assess, then maybe adjust it a little bit, then go on another bike ride, assess, and then adjust again. And it's a very long cycle. If you just go to a guy who knows how the bike fit, preferably somebody you pay, because generally if you have to pay for it, generally speaking, they know what they're doing. I mean, you at least hope they do. So in many ways, it can be a lot cheaper. I'm sure it's a lot cheaper than buying 10 different saddles, and it's definitely a lot faster. And I kind of just more or less move that fit to my other bikes as well. Now that you are comfortable on the bike, figure out what kind of cycling you enjoy. I noticed that when most people buy their first bike, they don't really know what kind of cycling they enjoy. Usually when you think, all right, I'm gonna bike, and they have this idea of cycling, but you don't realize that there are so many different subgenres of cycling. For example, me, I like to do a lot of gravel riding. I'll occasionally do a road ride and even a crit race. And I end up doing a lot of hill climbs as well because where I am in Cebu, Philippines, there are a lot of hills and that's where the best riding is here. So already I mentioned gravel riding, road riding, crit racing, and hill climb riding. So those are all kind of different. Or you might be into proper trail riding with a mountain bike or maybe even fixed gear riding. So the point is, there's a lot of subgenres of cycling and you kind of want to figure out which one you enjoy. I am of the opinion that most people's first bike is likely the wrong bike. So the role of that first bike is for the rider to figure out what kind of cycling they like. And ideally, that first bike is like a do anything kind of bike. You can try a whole bunch of different types of riding. And if you find that you like a very specific type of riding, then you can get a very specific bike like that. You probably don't want a triathlon bike as your first bike. Okay, I will talk a little bit about training. This is a video after all about how to get better at cycling. If you decide to do serious training on the bike, this is how I like to think of it. I like to think of it in very simple terms. So 80% of my riding is either in zone 2 or some other people call it maffetone. Maffetone is basically zone 2. And I really like how Peter Attia describes zone 2. So zone 2 is a pace where you can be on the phone with somebody and you can have a conversation on the phone and you can talk normally, but the other person on the other side of the phone can tell that you are exercising. So if you can do that, you are in zone 2. And the other 20% is in VO2 max. Now, VO2 max is a little bit more difficult for me to describe. I'm going to read it on my computer. VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen that an individual can utilize during intense or maximal exercise. Basically, it's very, very hard. Or one way to think about it is if you were to rank your effort, 1 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest, VO2 max would be a 9 or a 10. So it's not something that you can sustain for very long. So if you think about it in those terms, it becomes pretty simple. For example, if you bike 10 hours a week, then 8 hours of that should be in zone 2 or maffetone, and 2 hours of that should be in VO2 max or something close to VO2 max. Because most people, when they train in general, I think the mistake is they try to go hard every day. And eventually what happens is you reach this point of overexhaustion and plateau, and it feels like you're reaching VO2 max, but you're not really reaching VO2 max anymore. And you're just not getting better. You're just tiring yourself out. Obviously, this is super simplified. If you want to dig deeper, look into training plans, recovery weeks, designing an optimal training session. Maybe you want to peak for an event. Those are all things that you can dig deeper into. But for the broad strokes, this is an easy way to look at it. 80% in zone 2 or maffetone, 20% in VO2 max. Then briefly, I'm going to talk about nutrition. I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible as well. I live in the Philippines. It's really hot here, so I try to take a sip of water every 15 minutes. And in terms of my eating, my rule of thumb is 60 to 90 grams of carbohydrates per hour. And then how you figure that out is get your favorite little snack, look at the back of it, look at the label, and see how many carbohydrates there are for each snack. And you can just do some simple math. Maybe you need 2 bars an hour or 3 bars an hour. Eating that much is surprisingly difficult if you've not done it before. But when you are cycling, you are burning a lot of calories and you will need that energy to keep going. And also so you don't bonk. Bonking is when you feel like your body can't do anything. Every pedal stroke is a struggle. So make sure to fuel your exercise, especially if you're doing rides that are longer than an hour. It's also important to think about fueling your ride because not only are you fueling your body for the duration of that ride, you don't want to feel super fatigued after your ride. Because if you don't fuel your rides properly, then later on during the day, it is going to hurt you. you might not be able to do anything else. Like I still have to work after my bike rides. So after you've figured out what kind of cycling you enjoy, maybe you've done a lot of training already, you are reasonably good at the discipline that you have chosen, try the other disciplines as well. So for example, I'm not really a crit racer. I've done maybe 2 crit races in my life, but it is really fun because all those other experiences will make you a better bike rider. Maybe you'll learn bike handling, maybe you will learn how different disciplines feel on your legs, all those things. There's only learning to be done when trying new things. So don't just stick to that one thing that you found out that you enjoy. Try the other stuff as well. All those experiences will make you a better cyclist, but also more crucially, it'll help you stay motivated to bike. Which segues into what I think is the biggest mistake that most people make once they start training, especially if they start training for this one big event. A lot of people, they train really hard and then they do the event, they might do pretty well, and then they're so like, yes, I'm done with the event, and then they just stop training cold turkey. They stop doing whatever. Don't stop. Just take a break, but don't stop. I see this a lot in the triathletes here in Cebu because triathlon here is pretty big. A lot of people, they train for an Ironman, for example, and then it takes up months of their lives. It takes up so much time and energy. They do the triathlon, they get through the finish line. The feeling of jubilation is amazing. And then they don't bike, run, or swim for months after. And then all that fitness that they gained, all that weight that they may have lost just piles back up and it feels like they really are back to zero. I had this big race that I was preparing for. I did a lot of training for it. And then after the race, I was done. And I felt like it was really difficult to be motivated to continue training. So what I did was I took a break, not from cycling. I took a break from training. I still went on my bike. I went up with my buddy and he likes to go up this hill. So we went up the hill. It was a very easy effort for me. Like I was not trying to go fast at all. I wasn't even trying to reach the very top of the hill. My whole goal was go to the coffee shop and have a coffee with my buddy. That was it. I was still biking. I think I did that for like a week or 2. That meant I could still be on the bike. I was still exercising. And it helped remind me why I enjoy cycling in the first place, which gave me motivation to train later on. Because I think the best way to get better at cycling is just to keep cycling. Just don't stop. One of my biggest motivators is when I'm on a ride and then I see an old guy on a bike, especially if he is part of a fast group or if he is going up a mountain that is really hard. And you can tell that he has a lot more years than I have. But that is a huge motivation for me because that is what I want to be 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. I really like seeing the older folk cycling because it shows me that it is possible. And I've optimized my riding in a way so that I can reach that point, hopefully. And that is one of my biggest personal motivators to get better on the bike. Because I think that's the secret. The secret is just don't stop. Don't stop and you'll get better on the bike. Alright, I hope that was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions as well. No Boring Days, please subscribe.